Joining us now is our defense correspondent, Daniel Tsema. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. What is the latest you're hearing from the Defense Ministry?
Right. So actually just this very moment, we have an update from the Defense Minister Benny Gantz's office saying that he indeed held a situational assessment in the military headquarters in Tel Aviv in regarding to, of course, the rocket fire from South Lebanon towards Israel. In that meeting, there was also, of course, the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, the head of the Israeli Operational Directorate, Oded Batyuk, and the head of the Israeli military intelligence in order to really understand and to coordinate the next plan of action from the Israeli defense establishment. And of course, Gantz also emphasizing here the importance of maintaining a connection and communication with the Home Front Command in order to ensure that the civilian population is taken care of. Now, that's from the Defense Establishment Ministry. And what we really have heard in the last hour or so from the Israeli military itself, the Israeli military spokesperson speaking to Israeli military correspondents, saying quite clearly that it is not in the interest of Hezbollah to escalate the situation, that Hezbollah wanted to respond given the airstrikes that Israel conducted 2 nights ago in South Lebanon in response to these 3 rockets that were launched towards Israel, 2 landing in Kiryat Shmona on Wednesday. And so in that sense, Hezbollah wanted to send a message. Hezbollah's message indeed acknowledged the airstrikes. It also acknowledged 2 of its militants who were killed in alleged Israeli strikes, and also acknowledged that it was launching rockets towards open areas. This is something the IDF spokesperson also emphasized. And given the fact that it was towards open areas, according to both sides, even though they were 10 interceptions of the Iron Dome, which would indicate that these rockets were headed towards populated areas. But overall, Sarah, what this means, according to both sides, is that this is a response and that it is not necessarily going to be part of a larger confrontation. However, Israel is still coordinating its response and still planning its response, as we heard from the Defense Ministry, and also as we're hearing from the IDF spokesperson. We'll see whether or not the IDF will increase its retaliation. You also can say, Sarah, that the rocket launchers here appear to have been actually seized by the Lebanese army. Of course, Lebanese army operating in South Lebanon, but South Lebanon is for sure the stronghold of Hezbollah. It appears as though there was some internal issue given the fact that they were launching these rockets, of course, as they generally do from populated areas in South Lebanon. So a lot of pressure right now still building up in Lebanon. And here in Israel, it seems as though the defense establishment is trying to plan its next course of action.
Yeah, and Daniel, I want to ask you exactly about that next course of action, because could we see Israel target Hezbollah the same way that we saw the IDF target specific Hamas top brass back in May during the escalation, where we saw it target specific Hamas operatives as opposed to just specific posts?
Right. So I don't think that we would be seeing Israel conducting strikes to take out Hezbollah militants, although it's certainly possible. If Israel wants to have a measured response and to prevent an escalation, which if we deduce from the comments made by the IDF spokesperson and from the Israeli defense establishment at large, they don't want a full escalation. It would appear that taking out Hezbollah operatives would involve some sort of Hezbollah response. Hezbollah almost always responds when its own militants are killed, whether it be in Syria, whether it be in Lebanon, whether it be elsewhere. And so in that sense, you might see Israel striking Hezbollah infrastructure, but likely something that would still be able to be contained, where Nasrallah, who is, of course, due to speak tomorrow evening, will not feel enticed or obligated to respond even further. But for now, we know, as you mentioned, Sarah, Israel striking with artillery fire towards South Lebanon. We understand heavy artillery fire, as it was 2 days ago. We'll see whether or not it ends there. It's possible we could see some more activity, but Israel is going to have to be very calculated in how it responds, even if it thinks it's justified, so as not to provoke another response from Hezbollah this time around.